Welcome back, fellow jazz bums. Today we have another interview. We are pleased to speak with Danny Kaey, also known as SonicFlare. We're super excited to have him here. Before we jump into it, remember to like and subscribe. Please drop comments what you think about this interview. We also have the Jazz Bums Discord. So if you want to come join and chat with us, there'll be a link below. And then also we live stream every Friday, 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific. So come and hang out there as well. And with that, I'm going to kick it over to Felipe to get us started.
Thanks, Mike, Chris, and especially Danny for joining. So, little background here. Danny Kaey, he started writing HiFi for 23 years in the year 2000 when he joined Positive Feedback Online magazine, which I believe still is going on. Then in 2003, he joined Inner Ear, a Canadian magazine. In the meantime, he was also writing for German magazines Fidelity and HiFi Statement, also Audiophile Style, Chris Conacher's online magazine. Now has a project on computer audio. In 2007, he wanted to take SonicFlare, which was his project, from a blog to a bigger full scale, which happened in 2021, and we're going to go into that. And he's been also involved in many projects in hi-fi, vinyl, music in general, VC, reissues for 10 plus years. So I think it made a lot of sense for us to have him on the show. Thank you so much, Danny. I think you're going to have a great time here. We're going to have a lot of fun, a lot of deep discussions. And it's a pleasure to have this hi-fi enthusiast, bicyclist, and photographer joining us today.
Yes, that's right. The bicyclist. Felipe, Chris, Mike, thank you guys for having me. You know, you guys have all the big heavy hitters on, and the fact that you invited me to join, I'm very honored and grateful to share the screen with you guys. And thanks for having me. So, it's funny, as you were kind of reciting back the my resume, so to speak, on the hi-fi side, the first thing that comes to mind is I can't believe I've been around this hobby for 23 years. It's like time flies, man. Time flies. So,
well, thanks again for joining us. And I guess we just want to start with maybe tell us about where you grew up and how music, got into your life.
The always important question: How did you get into music?
An easy one.
Yeah, so funny enough, as luck would have it, as the planets aligned, so I was actually born in Pakistan, in Karachi, and my parents are from Belgrade, today Serbia. Back then it was the Great Federal Republic of Yugoslavia. And my dad was a steel trader by profession, and he would travel around the world and get contracts and stuff for the Yugoslav steel industry and vice versa and stuff. And so they landed in Pakistan for about 14 years, and that's where I was born. But I grew up in Vienna, Austria, and couldn't pick a more musical city, I guess, to grow up in. And, the fact, I guess my brother, I have a 10-year older brother. He's also into music big time. So it was kind of like this confluence of, growing up in a very musical city, very rich history in music, in the Austrian school system, which I went through, of course. Music is an actual subject that you study, kind of like what it used to be like here, but I guess vocation and all that, we took that off the list of unimportant subjects. So, I think we need to put that back into the curriculum. But be that as it may, I'm trying to remember, I had music like 3 times a week or something like that, if I'm not off. It was like 200 years ago, so who's counting? But I got into music very early. And the other kind of interesting confluence is that I grew up across the street from Art Farmer. Wow. And my BFF of life back then was his son George. And we met when I was 9. So we moved into that neighborhood when I was 9. And until I basically went to America in 89, we would hang out all the time. And I'd see his dad all the time when he wasn't touring. He was married to a Viennese lady. And we were really close friends. And yeah, that's kind of like how I got into jazz and all that stuff anyway. So
That's cool. Did you get to see him playing?
oh yeah. Practice sessions, all kinds of stuff. One time, I don't remember when it was, but Benny Golson stayed with him. So I got to meet Benny Golson. Of course, what you have to keep in mind is back then, none of that made any sense to me. Like Art Farmer. I don't know who Art Farmer is. I don't know who Benny Golson is. And of course, now that I'm getting older and, now that I got into jazz officially, formally, now it's like, holy shit, Art Farmer, Benny Golson, wow, jazz giants. So,
yeah. So to that, what were like your first forays into jazz? Did you dive head first, or were this just kind of like incremental?
It was incremental. I mean, look, man, it's kind of funny looking back. And again, when Felipe was going through the stuff, it's weirdly when someone else talks about you, it brings back all these weird memories, right? That you don't recall yourself. And no, I mean, literally, I think the first jazz record I ever listened to was Art Farmer, right? But it just didn't resonate with me back then. I mean, I was a teenager. And, I was more into Dire Straits and, we were playing Pink Floyd. I went to a boarding school. So, my crew, we played the Pet Shop Boys. Jazz was not on the scene at all. So, I didn't get into jazz until really when I started collecting records, I think, which was somewhere around 2002. When I got my first big turntable, and that's when I really started getting into jazz. I've been around the industry for so long, the hi-fi industry for so long, that I've met so many amazing people and made so many friends with so many amazing people. Dan Meinwald, he was the distributor for EAR. Out of the UK, the great Tim De Parvincini. Wealth of knowledge around jazz. And so he started, educating me and sponsoring me and giving me all the insights and an incredible jazz collection. And I was like, man, this is really cool stuff. So, it just kind of gradually grew from there.
Why did you get started working hi-fi?
So
what's your background in study? I mean, how did you get there? Yeah,
not at all. I mean, it was literally so true story. We had just moved to LA. This is the fall of 2000 or the summer of 2000, actually. And we're in Long Beach. And, I was reading Stereophile magazine for, forever, right? Ever since it was like that little pamphlet book thing. And then obviously it became the big print stuff. And, I was flipping through it and I come across the section where it says like the, monthly events and all that kind of stuff. And there was a little note that said, Long Beach Audiophile Society or Los Angeles Audiophile Society meeting, next Saturday, call this number and, if you're interested. So I'm like, hey, we're new in the area. I want to make some new friends. And, I give him a call and, Dave Clark picks up the phone and I'm like, hey, I'm Danny Kaey. I'm new to town. I'd like to see if there's any space left. Can I come and join? I had no idea what to expect. Right. I thought this was going to be at, some hotel or something as they usually are. He's like, oh yeah, come on over, bring your girlfriend, wife, whatever, we'll have some beers. We'll listen to music. And I walked in and, bunch of grumpy old men the typical sort of audiophile cliche, right? So I walk into his house, and I'm like, oh, gee, what is this? The model train convention here? We started chit chatting and listening to music and all that. And next thing you know, he's basically like, hey, we've got this magazine, Positive Feedback, and we're merging to get online. Right. And, we're looking for writers. We're looking for people to get engaged with, especially young people. And, would you be interested? Do you know how to write? And I'm like, shit, do I know how to write? I mean, I guess I know how to write. Of course, if I punch up some of my first couple of reviews that I've ever written, I'm like, oh my God, I can't believe I wrote that bad. But I was like, yeah, hey, why not? Sure. I mean, does this cost anything? He's like, cost anything? No, you're the one that's going to get to play with equipment. I'm like, what? Really? No shit. So I started writing for Positive Feedback, and how I got into hi-fi was really through my brother. I mean, my brother was, tinkering, building speakers, amplifiers. He was big into electronics and sound. And I remember he had he was always working. JBL was like his favorite driver, the professional drivers series that they had. And he was always building some new speaker. And my parents were like, oh my God, turn that noise off. I can't listen to it anymore. And I was like, yeah, louder. And that's how I got into it. In fact, I remember, I think I was like 10 or 11. And he took me to my first hi-fi show in Vienna. And I was like, oh, wow. Holy cow, look at all this stuff. This is crazy. This is so cool, And then, interestingly enough, next to my boarding school, so Revox from Switzerland had stores at the time. I think I'm pretty sure they were franchise stores. I don't think they owned them outright, but they were franchise stores. And so anything you saw in there was all Revox. And I remember because we went to school Monday through Saturday. So we only had one day off, but Friday afternoon, I'd go to that shop and, I'm like, hey, look, I'm just a, tiny little idiot here. I've got a couple of records. I've got some friends. We go to school over here. I don't have any money for any of this, but, do you mind if I play some music? And the guy was like, well, sure. Why not? Why don't you play some music? And I remember that's kind of like how the whole thing started for me. And I remember when I came to LA the first time in the 90s, I would check out all of the high-end shops. I mean, it was definitely one of those, unplanned, didn't study for any of this. Just, I like electronics. I like listening to music, playing records, playing CDs, whatever. And that's how I got into it.
But when you're having these partnerships writing for German magazines, you are still based here. You are not there.
Yes, correct. Yeah. So I speak fluent German. And one of the things that, I kind of, obviously I grew up reading all those German magazines, Image Hi-Fi, Stereo Magazine and all that. And I by nature, I like to connect things and I like to connect people. And so, when I was at these shows, when I go to hi-fi shows and stuff, I always meet someone new and they know someone and so on and so forth. And next thing you know, it's like I meet the editor of Image Hi-Fi. I meet the editor of Fidelity Magazine. And I'm like, hey, are you guys looking for anyone to write from a U.S. perspective for the German market, right? Well, German, Swiss, and Austrian market. I mean, they kind of, those three countries, because they're all German speaking. So that's how I kind of slid into that. And, I was in LA. And Ingo Schultz, who's the publisher for Fidelity. I mean, I'd see him at the shows all the time. from HiFi, Image HiFi. Anyway, I mean, look, it's a small industry. You know, this is such a tiny industry. It really is. And, you know, if you have half the wit of just, being, socializing with people, you'll get to meet everybody in one show. Right. And, the fact that I was attending these shows over and over and over again, it's just, like I said, if you're half a sociable person, you'll make friends, you'll meet people, and it just one thing cascades into another.
So you talked about you got into jazz in 2002 when you started collecting records. Was that a function of just the fact that the records sounded so good initially? Does that make sense? Like the jazz records and just the sound quality and all that?
That's an interesting question. I think probably. I think probably. I remember when I started collecting records. So I when I came from Austria, when I moved to the States, I took all my parents' records and all of my records, which was really, I don't know, like 30, 40 records with me. And they were always kind of collecting dust and stuff. And then, like I said, when I was with Positive Feedback for a couple of years, and I started seriously getting into vinyl. I quickly realized and recognized that there's all this digital is amazing and digital is ruler flat and digital is this and that. It's got dynamic range up the wazoo. But when you put on a record, it's like magic happens. And no doubt that had something to do with it on picking up. And besides, I mean, where are you going to find some of these records that you see at jazz or at swap meets or whatever, or a record store? They're still not on CD, and they're never going to be on CD. The tapes are long gone. There's no interest in any of that. I mean, CD today, obviously, for the most part, it'll be streaming, but even there, no one cares about that stuff anymore. It's actually, kind of jokingly, as I was saying earlier, when I was talking about, my the music that we had in school, we got to bring that back seriously from an intellectual level, from a just a knowledge level, from a historic perspective, from an educational perspective. Man, we need to bring back music because, gosh, people have completely forgotten and never learned anything about it.
You look at a lot of the jazz artists in like the late 50s, and a lot of their entry was through the public school system. Like
100%.
Like, I mean, we can basically tie it right back. So I agree.
100%.
That you were getting back into vinyl, and then particularly jazz in the early 2000s. That time period makes me think of Michael Hopson, Classic Records, Chad Kassam, Analog Productions. They were kind of early adopters. Early adopters. How did their kind of reissue series influence kind of like your buying behavior and listening behavior?
Yeah. So, interesting. No, little side fact. So I actually worked for Hopson for I want to say 2 months. It was, so I had known Hopson, Ying Tan. I mean, like I said, I know all these guys. I've been in the industry for so long. And the job that I had back then took me up to Hollywood once a week. And one of the places I would go visit was literally right across the street from Hopson's old RCA studios. Or actually not studios. It was RCA. What the heck was it? Some kind of a depot of sorts, where Classic Records was at. And so I'd always pop in and say hi and, what's going on, this, that, and the other. And so whenever Hopson had something new, it's like, oh, dude, got to come over and listen to this. This is really cool stuff. And yeah, I mean, and of course Chad with Analog Productions and all that. Although obviously I wasn't close to him because he was in Salina. But Hopson, I definitely had a very close, I wouldn't say close relationship, just a close proximity of being able to jot over there and, hey, here's something new that we're just putting out. What do you think of this? Right. Which is, I think, I'm trying to remember. I think that's how I met Kevin Gray and Steve Hoffman at the time as well. And yeah, I mean, definitely, you could, when they would come out with a reissue and, I had like, if I knew the title and I played either the record or the CD before that, it was just this dramatic difference of holy cow, man, this sounds so fresh. This sounds like it was recorded yesterday. This sounds like it's got so much energy. And, absolutely. I mean, whenever I'd go visit, I'd always come back with, 2, 3, 4, 5 records under my arms. And yeah, I mean, kudos to those guys. I mean, really, they were the pioneers. Ying Tan and Michael Hopson. The Ying was sort of the money guy, and Hopson was the creative director, so to speak. Man, they really set this industry on fire with what they did and how they did it, right? I mean, the level of detail and the level of it just steadfast insisting on we only want to produce excellent records, right? I mean, that was completely unheard of back then. Right. That was completely unheard of back then. In fact, I remember, telling my friends and stuff that are not into hi-fi, or maybe they are into music, but not necessarily hi-fi. They're like, oh, there's this new record coming out. It's, $25 for a record. Are you insane? What are you talking about? What, like, why is that so expensive? They still make records? What are you talking about? Yeah. So absolutely, they played a huge influence in my buying behaviors, and in getting into stuff, and just being like, wow, man. I mean, so sometimes there's obviously cases where the reissue sounds marginally better than the original, but so many times it was just like this knockout punch of holy shit, this was on the tape. Oh my God, that's crazy.
That makes sense. That reminds me of a question. You were buying stuff back in 2002, like you said. It was a very small market then, though. Since you've been in the industry the whole time, how did the vinyl explosion happen? And like, when did y'all start really seeing that take off?
To the extent that you want to call it an explosion, I think that really happened during COVID. Okay. The explosion part, right? I don't think it was so much of an explosion from what I remember, as it was more of this sort of gradual snowball effect of, more people are buying vinyl, more vinyl is being made, more vinyl is being made, more money can be invested into reissues, more reissues are coming out, more people are buying it. So it's like this, total snowball effect. And then of course, I think, frankly, the fact that, Hopson, Ying, when he split off from Hopson with ORG, obviously Chad with Analog Productions, Cisco, great A.B. Fawn.
What was the deal with Alto? It seemed like it was like a Classic Records, but Europe only, that Yin was kind of leading.
Yeah. So it was records that were technically, I guess, only sold in Europe. And just because of the licensing and all that. Okay. And he had a partner in Germany that was, doing all the production and mastering and all that stuff. But yeah, I mean, I think when you look at some of the amazing titles that came out, those definitely helped drive that constant progression curve. Because let's face it, no technology works unless you have the correct software to run it, right?
Mhm.
So if we look at turntables and all the equipment as the sort of vehicle of how we listen to music, you can have the best turntable. If you have shitty records, who cares, right? So the fact that they were able to get some of those titles that they got and put them out for people to buy, where either the records really aren't available anymore, and or they're so prohibitively expensive that you can't afford to buy them. And here's a guy that's putting them out for $30, $29, back in the day. Of course, now they're $40, $45, etc. I think that definitely helped drive this resurgence. And to your point, Chris, this explosion that we then saw with COVID, where you had to be at home and this, that, and the other, and all that nonsense. And hey, what am I gonna do when I'm at home? I'll just listen to records, right? And so when you look at all these guys, the spike that they saw with sales and sell through was just astronomical.
I'm sure.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Sorry to get back to your question. I definitely think it's like this double-edged, or not double-edged, but sort of this two tiers that allowed this to happen. It was, on one hand, the availability of the records, and on the other hand, the titles that were coming out that helped, like, wow, a guy like me, again, I could go into a shop or whatever, Analog Production, acousticsounds.com, and buy records that, you just impossible to find clean, or at the price that they're offering them for.
Yep. That makes sense. I think part of it too for me is just Gen X people coming of age and becoming adults with disposable income.
Absolutely.
Then, thinking back to when we were kids and the things we liked when we were kids, and that was records.
Yeah. No, for sure. And I mean, look, I think records have this, this just nostalgic feeling to them, where, it's like you're holding something that's been around for so long. Your parents had it. And I mean, I can't tell you how many times people approach me knowing that I'm into records and vinyl. They're like, oh, my uncle just passed away, and we found 500 records. Are they worth anything? Because they, everybody's by now kind of picked up that, with all the, whatever minimal coverage there is in the mainstream media about vinyl, everybody saw, hey, I heard from so and so that records are worth something. Is this, Kenny Rogers album worth anything? Is it worth $200?
It is if you're in an antique store, apparently.
Yeah, probably not.
Yeah, exactly.
So Danny, something we talk frequently about. I mean, we know labels are issuing their new stuff, of course, the new artists, the new music, but we see a lot of repetition there. I think during COVID was interesting, was good because people are just getting back, but now doing it like boxes and boxes and boxes of the same band or the same stuff, and I think they're starting to become boring. I mean, what do we see? Do you think the reissues, the audiophile labels, they're catering for future generations, or still catering to guys that are, don't have much time left?
Gosh, it's I always do these mental exercises around that question. For my own sort of, I always wonder, like, should I get into doing something in this industry, like formally? Should I, create something or build something or make something? Or, again, I'll be talking to someone in the industry and they're like, hey, what's your thought on this? Or, what's your opinion on that and all that? And, I definitely think that it's difficult for these guys because it all comes down to, it costs money. right?
Mm-hmm.
And so, do you reissue something that is a guaranteed sale, or do you reissue something that who knows if it's going to sell or not, right?
Right.
Maybe it's
Mm-hmm.
going to sit on the shelves. Your first run is 1,000 press, 1,000 records. You're not even doing 2,000 or 2,500. You're just doing 1,000. But think about it. 1,000 records, you're gonna find 1,000 customers.
Yeah.
And this industry is tiny. We are such a small pimple on a cow's butt when it comes to music in general, right?
Mm-hmm.
That perfect example. And by the way, you guys did such an awesome job with Craig, and Analog October Records. And I was like, wow, this was a really nicely done interview. And I remember when Craig first told me, like, this was, I don't know, maybe 2 years ago. Hey, I'm thinking about this, that, and the other. And I'm like, who the hell's Courtney Pine? Never even heard of the guy. Right. Now, granted, it just goes to show how little I know. Right. I mean, even with all the records that I have, a genuine, jazz star like Courtney Pine was a complete unknown to me. And obviously in many, many circles, he's like, oh my God, Courtney Pine. How do you not know Courtney Pine? Right. But fundamentally the question still stands, which is, okay, so you're going to reissue Courtney Pine's first album. And by the way, shameless plug for the record, of course. What else would I be doing? But you reissue an album like that, and seriously, it's like, dude, I mean, Craig has spent a boatload of money on getting the mastering rights, getting the cutting engineer, the jackets printed, optimal in Germany. We're talking about thousands and thousands of dollars that he had to invest into this, not knowing if he's ever going to sell a single copy of it.
Right.
Versus, should we reissue, let's see, John Coltrane for the 50th time, right? Miles Davis, Kind of Blue. I think we're up for one of those again, right? And it's as great as those are, Felipe, to your point, man, I'm tired of it. Seriously, it's like, dude, yawn. We got our little Discord group going for SonicFlare. And I by the way, I do need to join your guys' channel.
Yeah.
The guys are always chatting on there. And, I'm always like, oh my God, did you see they're going to reissue this? And I'm always like, #yawn. I'm like, seriously, for why?
Yeah.
So anyway.
Yeah.
Well,
but that just sorry, Chris, just to wrap this up, I think my marker store is like a mile from my office. I go there almost every day, and I see people like this, 20s, teens, early 30s, maybe. They're buying the current stuff. They're buying their Taylors, their Olivias, or whatever, and I think they deserve and want a good product. And also these guys are going to be like us in 20, 30 years, right? They're going to be consuming, probably buying high-end stuff. And I'm sorry, those guys don't even know who John Lennon was. They don't have to know. They just have to enjoy music.
Absolutely,
and that's why I don't think we need to throw Beatles every year on people. They just throw their stuff too. I think there's room for everybody.
I agree. I think there's definitely room for everybody. But I also, and this guy, I guess, brings up the scope of the conversation a little wider or a little higher, however you want to look at it, with, for example, Adele, right? Love Adele. Her voice, man, it's freaking awesome, right? But her records sound like shit. They sound horrendous. They're so overly compressed and processed that I'm like, dude, I can't listen to it. So to your point, okay, so you've got all these, Gen X, whatever, 20-year-olds, 30-year-olds going in there. Okay, I'm going to buy the Adele record. Oh, because I heard records sound amazing. Well, I'm assuming this record's going to sound amazing, right? And then, you know, again, and it's the bigger question, right? I mean, it's like this bottomless pit. Well, what are you playing it on? If you're going to play it on some $50 Amazon, you know, pile of crap, you know, plastic box from China, guess what? It's going to sound like total shit, right? So you've got a shitty record that's played back on shitty equipment, and it's going to be massive shit to your ears. I mean, how anyone could possibly think realistically, unless you've never heard anything else, that this doesn't sound good. So, you know, I think the mainstream guys and gals, they need to start investing into making better sounding records, right? Tom York, right? His I think it was either his last or penultimate album came out a couple of years ago. Animals, I think. Yeah, it's Animals. It's like this brown with this orange text on it. I mean, I did a file for a friend of mine. I was comparing cartridges, and he was like, "Oh, dude, I want to hear what that sounds like with the different setups and stuff." And on the on my Tascam TD1000, whatever it's called, recorder, I mean, the meters are pegged at 0 dB, like literally pegged. There is zero dynamic range in that record. Literally zero dynamic range in that record. It's blaring at you. It's so freaking obnoxiously loud sounding that it doesn't matter how loud or soft you turn the volume knob, you don't have it anymore. It's like I remember, I don't remember where I read this, but you know, back in the days of, you know, when the loudness wars were being discussed, you know, someone robbed you of the volume knob. So I think it's a double-edged sort of thing you have to look at. You know, yes, do we want people coming in? For sure. But man, the music has to sound good in order for that to even make any sense. Because why would you spend $40 on a Taylor Swift album when you can stream it basically for free on you know, Apple Music, Spotify, whatever?
Yeah, I think just personally, when I first got into record collecting, particularly jazz, I really was focused on the reissues that were coming out. And now I notice that where my interest really is are titles that are just not being reissued. So I'm going back to either like originals or earlier repressings of ways to get it. And sometimes there are like gray market pressings and other kind of like official reissues that just, to your point, like aren't pressed with like the level of attention that that some of the other reissue series that we've come accustomed to. So I think for me, it's just I'm buying a lot less of the reissues. I'm just looking for other things. And I have like a theory that I got into vinyl and jazz with a lot of other people, like the boom during the pandemic. And I feel like there is a cohort of people that are looking for these titles. And we're noticing like there's Muse titles that are getting really expensive, more expensive than ever. And it's because I think there's just more interest in those as people advance and try to grow their collection, particularly in jazz. So that leads me to kind of a question for you. Now, I remember this had to be like a few years ago. This is before you moved to
Hungary.
Hungary. You had an office, and I think I remember you saying in your office you had the jazz wall, and it was just like only jazz. Am I remembering that correctly? So in your own collection, number one, like how many jazz titles do you have? And then what is kind of like, is it just a mix of just everything, like reissues, OGs, everything in between, every style, flavor, whatever you can get your hands on that you want to hear?
So first of all, man, you know, every time I hear someone tell me, "Oh man, I remember your setup," or you know, your wall of jazz, I'm like, my heart. I miss our old house, and I miss the setup we had, and just being in my office surrounded by all, you know, it's a funny story. It was always such a great conversation starter when I was on a Zoom call for work. And everybody's like, are those records in the back? Do I see records back there? Holy shit. Like, how many records do you have? You know? and then I'm like, well, but those are just the jazz records. So like, oh my God, you know, anyway. So I have around about, I think I have around about 10,000 records, and of the 10K, I would say that probably 40% are jazz. So somewhere around 4,000 records on the jazz side. And it's definitely a big mix of OGs, second pressings, reissues for sure, right? But I learned early on, kudos to Dan Meinwald again. I remember when he took me on my first to my first record swap, Pasadena. That's right, Pasadena. Sunday morning, Pasadena. Like, I'm like, dude, what time should we get there? Like noon? It's like, noon? You crazy? By noon, everything's gone. Gotta get there at 8 a.m. I'm like, 8 a.m. on a Sunday? Are you nuts? But no, he told me, he's like, look, if you're gonna get serious about collecting records, buy the highest quality record that you can possibly get, given the amount of money that you have or you're planning to spend on it, right? In other words, don't buy a VG minus, don't buy anything less than that, because it's just going to cost you money in the end, right? And so I've really, I really, I guess, pride myself in the fact that I'd rather not have a record until I can afford to buy the one that I want, in the condition that I want it in, if it's an OG record, of course, right? Classic example, Alice Coltrane, Journey into Satchidanand Wandra, whatever, right? I'm bastardizing it, of course.
That's close enough.
Yeah, exactly. Funny enough, because I was just talking with my buddy about this, that record was on my list for 4 years to find in mint condition at a price that I was willing to pay for, right? And let me tell you, man, I must have looked at probably, literally, I'm not even kidding, 50, 60, 70 of these records over the years, maybe even 100. No, shit. And finally he found me one, and he was like, yeah, but this one's going to cost you. I'm like, how much? He's like, $100. I'm like, all right, let's do it. Of course, now that record, $100 is, you're not even going to get a VG for $100 anymore. Although frankly, I haven't checked prices lately, but, it's, yeah, I definitely, when I buy OG records, I want to get the one that I can best possibly get my hands on. Yeah. And then, of course, when it's a reissue, you get a reissue, whatever. And so, gosh, mix-wise, hard to say. I definitely have way more OGs than I have reissues, for sure. But I've got a ton of reissues too, right? So, and of course, typical audiophile. I had, I'm just like, because it's just in my mind, take five, classic. I had the classic 33. I had the classic 45. Of course, I had to get the Chad 33 and the Chad 45, even though they're cut from the same metal parts.
That's
right?
what I was going to say.
But it's like, no, I gotta have it, right? And of course, that was years and years ago. I actually stopped doing that. Like, seriously, I stopped doing that because it's why, I
guess you can't buy everything. You can't nowadays. You can't buy everything.
Correct. And I guess as I'm getting older, I'm getting more cynical, and I'm like, dude, really? Like, why am I? What's the point, right? When Love Supreme came out again for the 50th time on UHQR, I didn't get it. I literally did not get it, and I don't want it. I really don't want it. I've got so many stinking Love Supremes out there. My wife is always like, dude, you're insane. One of these days we'll just throw all this shit out the window. especially when it came to moving. I mean, oh my gosh, man, holy crap, dude, moving this collection and boxing it up and unboxing it. I'm still unboxing stuff. Anyway, pain in the ass.
You've moved it what, twice in the last year?
Yeah.
2 years? Dude.
Holy shit, man. Snakes and Oli.
Have you ever thought about purging? Or have you done a purge?
Yes, absolutely. In fact, I wanted to purge before we left, but it didn't work out. And I am definitely going to purge. Once my big goal right now is I'm going to catalog the entire collection. And then I'm really going to purge. And my goal is to end up with, I don't know, 3,000-4,000 records that are exactly what I want, that are what I'm going to listen to, and let the rest go to someone who, who's going to love them and care for them and all that kind of stuff. But I'm definitely going to purge. I tell you, this move really taught me the whole lesson and concept of, man, do you need 10,000 records? Hell no, you don't. What are you, insane?
Well, if you're listening to them, right? If you're just a collector that just likes to have the things, that's fine. But if you want to listen to them,
Yeah.
How long would it take you to listen to all 10,000 records? Like, if you even pulled it off in your lifetime, right? Like,
Lifetime, yeah.
6 lifetimes.
But just to follow up on the kind of the original or early pressings versus the modern reissues, do you have what are your thoughts on kind of like those decisions that they had to make in the 50s to master those records to play on the equipment back then, and then obviously the modern pressings that are mastered to play on modern equipment? Do you have and do you like, and that there's a lot of ways we can talk. There's mono carts, stereo carts, there's all different stuff in those early pressings. But do you have any preferences, or you pretty much just like it all and kind of like to experience everything?
It depends on what I'm sitting down to listen to with, right? So first of all, I strongly recommend anyone who has a collection of or plans to get a collection of mono records, invest in a good mono cartridge. It sounds dramatically better than playing that record back with a stereo cartridge and using a mono switch or summing the stereo to mono, however which way you want to do it. Trust me, it sounds a lot better. I mean, gosh, there's times when I'll, in my old home, when I'd sit down and I'd put on an OG that's mono, and it just sounds awesome, right? I mean, you feel like, oh my gosh, you're playing back a historic document. And I really view these records as historic documents of a time when they were coming out and being issued. And it's just like, holy shit, this sounds amazing, right? And then there's times when I'm like, I'll put on the latest and greatest Kevin Gray master of, whatever the hottest flavor is. And I'm just like, wow, this is just amazing. Holy shit. Look at how much more information they got out of these tapes. And with the equipment that's available today, how much more expressive it is and how much more of an experience it is. Right. And so, yeah, I mean, I definitely, I can do both, I think, pretty well. Is there a favorite? I mean, it depends on the experience, right? Do you want to kind of like, have the lens of nostalgia around it? And, hey, I want to hear what it sounds like, approximately 50, 60 years ago. Or do you want to play it back with, trying to see what you can get out of these tapes, and having the latest, greatest, fanciest cartridge you can put on it, and being just like, holy shit, man, I'm willing to bet so-and-so never even heard his own record sound that good. Right. Mm-hmm. And, case in point, Art Farmer, right? I mean, the guy's stereo, he had a Technics 1200, I think, for his record player. And he had like a Yamaha receiver, and I don't even know what loudspeakers he had. It was literally nothing fancy, right? But he didn't care, right? I remember George and I, man, we would sit there with his records and we're like, oh, let's play them back wet. So we'd pour water on the so it was playing. His dad would come in, what are you guys doing there? Anyway, kids will be kids. But yeah, I mean, it depends on the mood, I guess. Depends on the mood. Look, listening to music, in my humble opinion, in my experience, music playback is an experience. It's not a task. It's not a chore. It's not it's not background music. It's an experience. And what kind of an experience do you want to create to facilitate that otherworldly experience that you want to get out of it? That's how I'm looking at it, right?
That makes sense.
And I do feel like, as the collector in me, the hunt for the original pressing is also something that is almost unplanned. Like you almost have to have like an arsenal of knowledge and then kind of go in and maybe like a record that you didn't expect was going to be there is there. And it's just kind of an amazing, find. And that also adds to it. Whereas, if you order the next classic series off of Amazon, it's a great sounding record. There's, I do that. And, but it's just, that also is part of, a different experience too.
Yep. 100%. 100%. I mean, the digging and the random things that you find. So in my previous job, I was traveling around the country a lot, and I had all of my record stores planned out, right? And so, every day after work, I'm going to go here, I'm going to go there. In Kansas City, I had my 3 stops that I would go to. In Seattle, I had my 2 stops, and so on and so forth. San Francisco. And it's, oh shit, holy crap, I wasn't even looking for this. And look what I found, So yeah, 100%. I mean, it's definitely part of the game is that experience of finding something that you weren't even looking for. And I mean, look, again, I think I have a baseline level knowledge of music, compared to some of the friends that I have. It's like truly a pittance. I mean, these guys know stuff that I'm just like, holy shit, man. Wow. So anyway.
Well, we have friends like that join us on our live streams on Fridays.
Nice.
That guy has forgotten more about jazz than the 3 of us.
Exactly.
He'll bring out shit. We're like, what is that, man? He's like, I got 30 records from this guy. What the fuck are you guys doing? Like,
and there's another friend of ours, Michael Johnson, Poetry on Plastic.
Oh yeah. Yeah, of course.
I've learned how to, look for, I mean, obviously I'm extremely limited, but I can look in the classical bins and I can, see if anything's good in there. And I'm enjoying that so much.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Should we talk about this record?
It caught my eye. Yeah. Dream with Dean. Yeah. Dean Martin, man, my all-time hero, TV actor, movie actor, just singer. Man, he's like, Dean Martin is definitely one of my big time heroes, kind of like James Bond. Not any particular actor that played him, but just a character. I mean, Dean Martin to be a character, right?
I just listened to like 2 nights ago. I listened to Rat Pack at the Sands. It's the double LP, and he comes out doing his shtick. I listened to the entire concert. It is so phenomenally good. It's funny. They're such professionals, and they've done this probably like 100,000 times. So it's so like their interactions with each other are so second nature that it's just like top notch. I love it.
Yeah.
What do you want to tell us part about how you and Chad came up with this reissue?
So a good friend of mine, Robert Pincus, he was the archivist and librarian at Cisco. and then at Impex Records for a while. He's one of those walking encyclopedias around music, right? And I obviously I had all kinds of Dean Martin records, including Dream with Dean. And he was like, you know what? I'm willing to bet that if somebody would get a hand of the master tapes, that record is going to sound insane. So I played it, and Chad and I were buddies, and I was like, dude, you got to reissue this record. Trust me. And he's like, man, what are you talking about? And I'm like, just get a copy and listen to it and hear the potential. And I mean, I think I bugged him about that for probably 5 years up until he reissued it. And a lot of it, I think, from what I remember, a lot of it was on the legal side of things, the estate and all that. Dean Martin left a mess behind, like so many of these, Hollywood guys. Jerry Lewis, his old-time partner, same thing. These guys are such entertainers, but their private lives are a freaking mess. And he must have left a giant mess behind, because I think it literally took like 3-4 years to get all the dots crossed and I's dotted, with T's crossed and I's dotted with the lawyers and legal teams. And so Chad finally reissued it. And the funniest thing was, like, he sent me the test pressings, and he goes, did you get the test pressings? Did you get the test pressings? I'm like, yeah, I got him. I played it. It sounds freaking amazing, right? He's like, dude, did you look in the dead wax? And I'm like, the dead wax? Why would I So I look at it. Oh, shit. It says 4DK in there. Oh, my God. That's hilarious. Chad, you're the king. I love you to death, man. That's freaking amazing.
That is amazing.
And he goes, yeah, man, I can't believe you didn't see that. What's wrong with you?
So I love that album. I think it's the perfect late night record. And I'm such a fan of SonicFlare that I jumped at this record after you announced that this is also one to consider the Dean Martin TV show, which he did have a TV show, but this. I think this just used that title. It's not clips from the show. These are just studio takes.
Yep.
And it's a little bit more orchestrated. It's not like a small group like Dream with Dean, but it is still very good. So if you do like that one, definitely go check this out. It's also equally good.
That's a good one. Yep. I play that often. Yep. Love it. Aw, you guys are too kind. Group hug.
Should we do a little show and tell?
Show and tell.
Yeah, let's do it. I'm curious.
All right. So first off, of course I had to do this. The Courtney Pine that's going to be coming out with Analog October Records. Highly recommend you get this. Like I said, I did not know Courtney Pine one way or the other up until it came out that that's what he's going to be reissuing. And super fantastic record. He kind of changes styles after this quite considerably, but this is definitely a super killer title, The Urge Within. And of course, Craig did such an awesome job with you guys have seen it. He's shown it to you. But anyway, so I, shameless plug, I had to put that in there. Next up, Paul Desmond with Jim Hall.
Oh, nice.
Paul Desmond. I love Paul Desmond. Absolutely love. I think I have probably, maybe not every album, but probably 80-90% of his records. And there's a lot of shit in there too, right? Especially the later stuff. It's crap. But this is friggin' amazing. Absolutely killer record. Very sort of, kind of like the Dream with Dean, late night listening. Absolutely fantastic. This is an OG, still in shrink.
Is there a rhythm section on that?
No. It's just Jim Hall on guitar, Gene Wright on bass, and Connie Kaey on drums. Yeah, super minimalist. Awesome record. One thing we never got into: should you remove the shrink from your record? I don't know. Should you?
Oh,
I don't know.
My kind of stance is if there's a hype sticker on it, I generally keep the shrink if I can, like if it's not a gatefold. And then if the shrink's just on there, I'll take it off if there's no hype sticker, generally speaking.
Teal Joy. So this is probably very unusual.
Oh, I know. Didn't she have a Bethlehem?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. So she's the product of the late 50s 60s era of all these ladies coming up through the movies and TV and getting their record deals and all that. And actually, funny enough, I heard of her, and this is one thing I love about this community, HiFi and vinyl and all that together, is the recommendations that you get from people. It's astounding, right? This I picked up on a recommendation from John DeVore of DeVore Speakers.
Yep.
Absolutely brilliant record, wonderful singing. I think she only did 2 or 3 records, and then committed suicide or something. So Rising Sun, Teruo Nakamura. Ooh. Japanese, absolutely killer jazz funk 70s. I'm totally into that jazz. I'm getting into that whole Japanese side. I mean, talk about a can of worms that you're going to open up. Oh my gosh, man. The Japanese are absolutely nuts about jazz. And some of the stuff that's come out and some of the stuff that's available is just unbelievable. Highly recommend this record. If you're into jazz funk at all, absolutely killer sonics and fantastic music. And of course, you got to have a summer jazz bowl. Dude, everyone's out there. Hubert Laws, Stanley Turrentine, Milt Jackson, Johnny Hammond, Ayrton, Jack DeJohnette, Bob James. Dude, such an awesome record, right? I mean, you play this and, it's like you feel like you're part of the concert, right?
Hang on a second. I have a question for you. Back to the Japanese stuff. Have you bought any of the re-released jazz titles? Like the Ryo Fukuis and... Yes,
yeah, of course. Yes, absolutely. Oh, freaking awesome. Isn't that amazing? I mean, it's electrifying. It's like literally, it's like, shit, these guys have rhythm, punch, bass. I mean, awesome stuff. Yeah. Exactly. Strongly recommend if you're into it or looking to get into it. And one thing that's interesting, I guess, they don't press high volumes, so they sell out pretty quickly, and then it ends up being like $200 on Discogs. So anyway, buy now, cry later. This is a Bill Evans that many people don't generally talk about. I mean, it's always his other titles, but this is absolutely killer, very low key. Just an awesome. This is the Analog Productions, came out. Gosh, when did I get this? Is there a date stamp on here? There isn't. I want to say 2005, 6, somewhere on there. So time flies. What's that?
What's that record called? The title?
It is Quintessence.
Oh, okay, cool.
Yeah,
I haven't heard that one.
And then, of course, the great Lee Konitz, and arranged by none other than Jimmy Jeffrey.
Oh, wow.
Absolutely friggin' killer.
Oh, interesting.
Stunning. Jimmy Jeffrey, man, he is, first of all, he plays phenomenally all by himself with his trio, and then later quartet. But this is such an awesome record. Must have. And then, of course, dude, this is one of those classic examples of how did I get into listening to records, and why do you kind of sort of not automatically, but more or less automatically drift into the jazz section? I mean, come on. How can you not?
Yeah.
I mean, this is, absolutely the great Marty Piach. Or Marty Pay, sorry. Killer. Smooth, rich, tonal textures. Friggin' awesome. Absolutely awesome.
What label is that on?
So cool.
Tampa.
And then last but not least, wait a second, for the CD lovers, I got 2 CDs.
All right.
Beverly Kenny,
Oh, yeah.
Strongly recommend her.
Mhm.
And Stir Fried.
Oh yeah.
Oh, Art Pepper.
Yes.
Wow.
Killer.
Yeah.
Absolutely killer.
Nice.
So anyway,
Very cool.
Great.
Nice
Great
stuff.
stuff.
that's
Very cool.
that. That's all, folks.
All right. Well, does anybody have any final questions or comments before we close it out?
I have a funny one. You can leave it out if you want, but you mentioned purging. If you're gonna purge, where are you gonna start? I should go to
I
that
know.
shelf.
I know, man. I know that's, I didn't want to get into it too much earlier, but that's definitely a good question, Felipe, because I'm so emotionally attached to my records. It's almost like I should give them to my wife and have her purge it. So I don't know what's going to be gone. Because I'm going to be like clinging on to every record. I'm like, no, man, not this one, right?
I know it's hard.
So, I don't know. That's going to be a tough one. I have to do it. We're never going to be moving again with 10,000 records. I have to do it. But it's going to be a tough one. No question.
If you purge,
Yeah.
would you do something like an auction? There's a lot of VC auctions, or would it be something?
Probably. Yeah.
That could be fun.
Yeah.
It is fun. I mean,
Yeah.
I've done that. I was going to say, you start with just a crate of records you want to sell. Just 50 records, 100 records,
Good point.
So for me, what's been
Yeah.
nice about it is I'm taking stuff out of my collection that I'll never listen to again, probably. I'm like, man, this is a really good record.
Mhm.
I'm like, am I going to listen to this in the next 10 years? Probably not, right? And then taking 5 of those and turning them into some really kick-ass, $50, $60 record. So
Yeah.
That's a good
what
point.
I've been doing.
Yeah.
you want to tell everybody where they can find you? We'll put the link to your social stuff in.
Thank you. Yeah, just SonicFlare. I mean, I stopped writing for others, so it's all on YouTube now. SonicFlare. I've got lots of cool plans for the channel. Once we're probably about 80% settled, I would say 75, 80%, and I'm going to be kicking it up with weekly videos, record reviews, hi-fi reviews. I already got some stuff lined up. And I definitely am going to get back into it, coming out regular videos, and really, in this sort of transition time where, I'm trying to figure out, I kind of left the corporate world. And I kind of want to figure out what I'm going to do next. And so this SonicFlare is definitely going to be a priority for me.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah, I did want to discuss SonicFlare, so you'll have to come back, and we'll have to get into it. And of course, you can come and hang out on the live stream whenever you want.
Love it. Thank you. I will. Absolutely.
So thank you, Danny, for joining us. Remember to like and subscribe. Leave comments. Let us know what you thought about this. Love hearing feedback. We'll link all Danny's social media in the description for everybody. And any final words?
Thanks for having me, guys. This was great. I love the community. I love the friendships that are being developed, that you develop individually and as a group and stuff. So, you guys are awesome. Look forward to hanging out.
Thanks.
Awesome.
Thank
Thanks,
you,
Danny.
Danny.
Thank you,
Thanks,
Danny.
guys. Ciao.
Pleasure.